Hey everyone! When you think about the great conflicts of the wizarding world, a few big ones probably come to mind. You know, the First and Second Wizarding Wars, Grindelwald's Global Rebellion. These are the epics that we all know. But what if I told you there was another war? One that's actually written down in the history books, but that almost everyone, and I mean everyone, has completely forgotten. It's a war that, once you see it, kind of changes everything.
And look, this isn't some wild fan theory. We're talking about a conflict that is officially part of the record. It's buried so deep that it's practically invisible. And once you dig it up, you start to realize that our whole understanding of the fight against Voldemort might be missing a huge piece of the puzzle.
So, where do we even begin to look for this hidden history? Well, it turns out the first clue pops up in the one place you'd be most likely to completely tune out. Yep, the only direct written mention of the giant wars, and notice that's plural, wars, comes from the most notoriously boring class at Hogwarts, History of Magic, taught by the ghost Professor Binns. It's described as so mind-numbingly dull that Harry and Ron literally played hangman instead of taking notes. And just like them, pretty much the entire wizarding world missed this crucial hidden detail.
Okay, so to really get a grip on this war, we first have to understand the warriors. So who exactly are the giants of the wizarding world?
Now, it's easy to just think of them as simple brutes, and yeah, they are these enormous magical beings, often towering over 20 feet tall. Their power isn't just about size either. They have this raw strength and a thick hide that can just shrug off spells. But here's the thing, they aren't mindless. They have their own language, their own culture, and a social structure that's built on one very simple, very brutal principle.
Their entire society boils down to this: might makes right. The strongest giant in any given tribe rules as the Gurg, but this isn't some crown you pass down. Oh no, it's a title you hold only for as long as you can physically crush any challenger who comes for it. And as you can imagine, that creates a ton of instability.
This one dynamic shapes their whole world. Every argument gets settled with violence, and the leader is always just one fight away from being overthrown. And what's really crucial here is that this constant infighting meant that their population was already in decline. They were kind of pushing themselves toward extinction long before the Ministry of Magic ever got seriously involved.
All right, let's fast forward to the summer of 1995. This is where we see this one key moment that just perfectly illustrates the tense relationship between wizards and giants, a top-secret diplomatic mission ordered by Albus Dumbledore himself. By 1995, the situation is, well, it's dire. The entire global population of giants has been whittled down to a single tiny colony. We're talking about 80 individuals. That's it. 80 giants left in the entire world, all hiding out deep in the mountains.
So Dumbledore sends in two ambassadors, Hagrid and Olympie Maxime, to try and win the giants over before Voldemort can. And their strategy, as Hagrid explains it, was all about patience. They couldn't just show up and make a deal. They had to bring gifts to the Gurg, a giant named Carcass, day after day, just slowly building trust. Because as Hagrid knew all too well, if you overload a giant with information, they'll kill you just to simplify things.
And this moment just perfectly lays out the two opposing philosophies at play. On one side, you have Dumbledore, using diplomacy, patience, and respect. On the other side, you have Voldemort's Death Eaters, who showed up with a much, much darker strategy. They didn't bring gifts, they preyed on the giant's very nature. They stoked the flames of conflict, promising power to anyone brutal enough to take it.
And because of that instability we were just talking about, Voldemort's strategy worked like a charm. Carcass, the Gurg, who was actually starting to warm up to Hagrid, was violently overthrown. We're talking ripped his head off. A rival named Golgamoth took over, immediately allied himself with the Death Eaters, and forced Hagrid and Maxime to run for their lives.
The whole mission was just a complete and utter disaster. But the real question is, why? Why were the giants so quick to side with the group promising violence and revenge, instead of the one offering peace? To find that answer, we have to look much, much deeper into the past.
You see, the Giants' decision wasn't really about who had the better sales pitch in 1995. It was the inevitable result of centuries of bad blood between their kind and wizard kind.
And you have to understand, this was not a one-way street. The wizarding world despised the giants. The Minister for Magic himself, Cornelius Fudge, basically admits that just trying to talk to them would have been political suicide. This fear and hatred, it was woven deep into the very fabric of wizarding society.
So if we look at the clues, we can actually piece together a rough timeline of this conflict. And it wasn't one single event, it was a long, slow-burn war.
It probably started way back in 1692 with the Statute of Secrecy. I mean, you can't exactly hide a 25-foot giant. This likely led to centuries of wizards pushing them farther and farther into remote regions. Then, in the 1970s, they sided with Voldemort and committed some horrible attacks, which led to Ministry auras hunting them down, killing many, and forcing the last survivors into total isolation.
So this brings us to the big one. Why does any of this forgotten history actually matter? How did it directly shape the events of the Second Wizarding War that we all know so well?
Well, you have to put yourself in their shoes for a second. From the Giants' point of view, this wasn't really a choice between good and evil. They saw two groups of wizards, the ones who had hunted them, killed them, and driven them to the very brink of extinction for centuries, and another group who was offering them a chance to fight back. Their desperation made them the perfect recruits for Voldemort. He didn't offer them peace, he offered them the one thing they really craved: revenge.
And that's really the heart of it all. The Forgotten Giant Wars aren't just some boring historical footnote. They are a foundational pillar of the Second Wizarding War. The Giants joining Voldemort, that wasn't just some unlucky break for Dumbledore's side. It was an inevitability, written in centuries of blood and betrayal that the wizarding world had simply chosen to forget.
And that leaves us with this one kind of haunting final question, doesn't it? If the wizarding community had actually remembered and reckoned with its own violent history with the Giants, could things have been different? Could they have been approached as allies instead of enemies? And how might that have changed the course of the entire war? It's a pretty powerful reminder that the history we choose to forget rarely stays buried forever.